Group 1, technically.
Oh, group 1.
That's okay. It don't matter. I think we're the smaller one, so that's fine. So, we had a little step out. So I was a 21st century person, but now we're going to step back in time to the 18th century, 1700s. We are here to tell some stories of the past and maybe some still living here. Now, where we are right now, of course, is the King's Bastion. Now, does anybody know a little bit about Louisbourg already and things that have happened here? No? Some of you been here before?
Yes. Yep.
Most of you been here before. So we know, of course, that it's a military fortress where battles were fought, people died. And a lot of those deaths, of course, were not necessarily happy deaths. They were not resolved, and their souls were not put to rest. One of those places, of course, that people would haunt, of course, is the King's Bastion. Now, if you think about it, how large it is, we had 500 soldiers here, living here in the 18th century. Anybody sleeping in the barracks tonight?
Yep.
Yeah, a few of you? Oh, you guys are lucky. Pretty spooky. So, of course, those of you sleeping in the barracks know it's already pretty creepy up there when it's dark. But in the 18th century, this whole area, on one side we had the soldiers, on the other side we had the governor. Now, just to give you a little taste of the wealth of the governor, between 10 and 20,000 bottles of wine were in his basement.
Wow.
And a large chest of chocolate next to his bedside. So that's one level of the scale of how rich people were. Do the kids want to have bed next to their chocolate next to their bedside as well?
Yeah. It's good.
And do you know what's really creepy? The governor in 1744 only had one leg and drank all that wine and ate all that chocolate. So maybe someday you'll see a one-legged governor hopping around, haunting the walls. But the real stories of people who actually saw ghosts here in the 18th century, not in the 18th century, in the 21st century, was that one day, while a supervisor went up to check to make sure there was no staff left in the building, she saw a soldier. You guys all know what the 18th century soldiers look like? Wearing a blue uniform, of course. We may have all been stopped at the gate sometimes asking if we're English spies. Well, in the 18th century, during this day, the supervisor ran up waiting for the bus. At this time we were leaving, the staff were leaving by bus. They looked up and they saw a soldier. They thought it was just a staff member. But then when they ran down, they said the bus was leaving in 10 minutes. When they ran down, they realized there was no actual staff member. It possibly was a ghost from the 18th century. They believe that it was. Now, that was a soldier. Now think, like I said, there are lots of bodies buried underneath this bastion as well. And of course the barracks is on the right-hand side, right next to the chapel. We'll go into more of that when we go in the chapel. But underneath the bastion itself, there is a crypt of 30 bodies that were found, bones that belong to people that we do not know who they are. Possibly, anybody from New England? Anybody been to New England? New England. Possibly New England soldiers that starved to death during the winter of one of our battles here. And their bodies now lay beneath the ground here. And we don't know who they are, so they may be searching for their way home. So if you see any New England soldiers, not French soldiers, or some New England women, feel free to point out where they are. Now, did any of you notice when it was light out? So is anybody staying in these tents over here?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah? So did you notice the what almost look like jail cells in behind? They're called, did anybody explain to you what they are? No. They're called casemates. Now, if you know your Louisbourg history, you'll notice that we had two battles here. The years don't really matter, but it was 1745 and 1758. Now, during 1758, what would happen is you notice, of course, does anybody know the difference between a fort and a fortress? Yeah, what's the difference? The only question I'll ask you throughout the tour that you need to know the answer to. Fortress, you have military and civilians, so people who are soldiers and not soldiers. All the people who are civilians during the war went into the casemates during the day, locked themselves in to protect themselves, especially women and children. Now, during the day, what would happen is that you would hear the screams of all of the women and children screaming as they heard the cannons blasting the walls. And they were locked in there. The only time they could get out is during the nighttime. So if you hear screaming with the wind, that's them coming back. Now, no one, as far as I know, no one actually died while they were in the casemates, but think as well. I'm sure most of you bathe regularly. We, as 18th century people, bathe once a year, maybe twice. They believe the dirtier you are, the more healthy you are. The cleaner you are. The reason I'm wearing a bonnet right now is to protect you guys because, of course, I want to keep my lights inside the bonnet. If I was rich, I'd shave my head and put a wig on top, possibly. That was even women. So keep your head far away from mine, of course, and I've only bathed, I did bathe about 6 months ago. So what you're smelling, of course, I'm sorry.
Same.
6 months ago? Well.
Yeah, he hasn't bathed in 5 years.
5 years, well then. So, keep in mind the casemates. You don't want to go in the casemates, of course, because you don't want to hear the screams of the children and the women as the cannonballs hit them. Boom, boom, boom. And then we're going to go into the chapel. I don't know if they finished in there. It looks like they're leaving now. But before that, of course, yes, they are leaving. We are going to go into the side door. I don't know if it's open, but if not, we'll go in the main door. Are you guys ready to be? I think, anyway, churches are creepy no matter what time of day you go. Yeah. But we just ask that you guys do not go up the street.
Turn it off. No, I thought it was somebody. Yep.
Oh my God. It is very nice.
So welcome everyone. Is everybody in? So welcome everyone to, of course, our military chapel. The only church we had here in the 18th century, which means everybody would attend Mass, including the civilian population. Now underneath you, so underneath the chapel, remember I mentioned there are bodies buried? There are 5 buried underneath the military chapel. One, a former governor, remember the guy I mentioned with the one leg? He's buried underneath the chapel. You also have Duc d'Anville. You have another person, the names don't really matter. You have another military captain and another governor. But then you also have a baby. So there are 5 people in total, a baby, we do not know who it is. And they're buried underneath. And the body of Duc d'Anville was disturbed 3 different times before it came to its resting place here. And he basically, they don't know exactly what he died of, but he had launched an attack here when we were captured to help take control back of Louisbourg, but he lost most of his men on the way over. And then eventually when he died, they think that what he would have died of course, is a brain tumor, but they tried numerous treatments on him before before he died. And none of it worked. Bloodletting with leeches, all that sort of things. So you can imagine the state of his body when he left this earth. Now this place, of course, because it's a chapel, there are numerous stories associated with creepy things that are happening. One of them being that in the 1970s there was a fire here. Now in the attic when they were doing repairs, what they saw was that when a guy was cleaning up all the ashes from the debris of the fire, he noticed there was one spot that had no ashes on it. And above it, there was a floating orb, a floating ball of wax. They don't know why it was there, but it was just floating there and it was unexplained. And it shouldn't have been there because, of course, there was that fire there. Also, one time, a guy in the 80s was doing a guided tour, came in here, and noticed that there was someone dressed like me at the altar. When someone was dressed like me at the altar, she thought that it was an animator, just playing a role. Often they would come up and do certain things in the chapel. The woman was weeping. She asked the person, "What are you doing here? What role are you playing?" The crowd did not see the woman. It was only the guy that saw it. So it could have been of a woman from the 18th century crying. And of course, they would come to pray away for all of their sins. Keep in mind as well, of course, in the 18th century we had lots of shipwrecks. So you'll notice when you're here in the daytime, you'll notice that we also have ships hanging in our windows. That's to prevent anything bad from happening. So we want to have those as good luck. If we made the voyage across, not like the other Duc d'Anville, we would put the ship in as a form of thanks. Now, in the 18th century, if you were to commit a crime that was basically a way of destroying any religious property, it was a severe punishment. One man, he had left a book in the barracks, so where you guys are staying. When he left a book in the barracks, he basically got drunk one night, came into the chapel, he had cut himself, he bled all over the altar. He also he dropped bread and onions as well by the altar and took something else from the church. When people came in the next morning, they discovered the blood on the altar. He was charged with destroying religious property, and his punishment basically was to wear a sign that says destroy of religious property, and he was paraded around town. And then he was banished from the French Empire and was charged £3. So he was not allowed to come back. So some people say that maybe his spirit could be haunting here as well, because of course his soul is not at rest and he left here not on happy terms. So be careful in the chapel, because of course 18th century, like I said, pretty creepy. And I will say as well, one time when I was in a chapel, not this one but an older chapel somewhere else, I did see a shadow of someone as well. So it's very common to see unknown shadows associated with different spirits. And this chapel has been used by numerous people throughout the years after Louisbourg was founded and rebuilt for other things as well, so it could be modern day spirits as well. And they did find the paranormal people, another group of paranormal people were in here at one time doing tests, and they did find voices. They did hear voices when they did recordings here and here overnight of possible spirits as well. So this is one of the main sites that they investigate. Any questions? No? Ready to keep going?
What's morning? Huh? What's that morning?
People. Trying to scare me.
Are you scared yet?
It's interesting.
I'm freaked out. Stop shoving in there. I'm not doing it. Maybe it's somebody. Maybe it's you. Where's there she is. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Probably went back.
You must have gotten scared.
No, because your dad was hurt.
Oh, that's what I meant. Scared of the fact that his legs sore. Yeah. No, they're not scared.
You guys are doing okay?
Oh yeah, we're fine.
Okay. Do I have any volunteers to sit on the wooden horse? That was a joke because it's only an inch thick.
I know, it feels really bad.
It does, and it's too high up, so I can't let you on it because it's dark. But maybe at some other time. I will need a volunteer later on for some other punishment. Maybe, yeah, we can have a few different people. But you guys all see the nice wooden horse that's here. We all see it?
Yeah.
All right, does anybody know what it's for?
Yeah.
It's for punishment. What kind of punishment? What would happen? Yes, the one raising their hand.
In between here. Can I see it?
I meant more generally. So in the 18th century, if a soldier maybe committed an offense, the punishment would be the wooden horse. That's what it was called. They would sit on top of this. It's an inch thick. They'd place either weights or muskets on their feet to weigh them down. their hands would be shackled behind them, and they would sit there for between 15 minutes to an hour. And of course, they're male soldiers. Now that was only one form of punishment. Now, the military had their own form of punishment. If you did severe crimes, you could have very, very bad forms of torture. Now, one of the games they like to play is that if you committed an offense, what it's called is running the gauntlet. You would strip down to your waist, and you have two lines of soldiers in a line, and you'd run between them, and they'd have sticks. They'd be hitting you with their sticks as you ran. You can imagine what it was like. Now, in the 18th century, this area was the spot of a brutal murder. Someone, a very important person, there was a feud between two men, Longy and another gentleman. They found a body laying here, still alive, stabbed in the front and stabbed in the back, and a slash on his face, laying on the ground. He was unable to speak, but there was something in his pocket. It was the name of a gentleman that they believed was his attacker. It was Longy. The problem was that this person was very rich and very important. So, no form of justice was served. So the person who maybe would have killed this gentleman was never found guilty, was never hanged for his crime. So they do say, of course, that the ghost of this person is now haunting Louisbourg, of course, because there was no resolution. And in the 18th century, the idea of justice was not, of course, restoration, it was retribution. An eye for an eye is what they believed. So be careful, because the gentleman could be dangerous. And especially because you guys are English speakers, keep that in mind. You could be English spies to all these military soldiers. So be careful. So the wooden horse is here, of course. And of course, there were other forms of punishment. If you did something else, they could stick your tongue with a hot poker, a fire poker. Would be one form of punishment. If you deserted, the threat was death by hanging. So there were lots of severe punishments, and the military controlled all of them. Now, if something happened where there maybe wasn't a set military court, it could be maybe up to the military to administer their own form of punishment. So the severity would depend on the military people in charge. You can imagine in the 18th century, their idea of what punishment was. Especially people who a lot of them were prisoners coming off the streets of France. So they weren't honest men to begin with. And they were the poorest of the poor. And again, they were the ones, of course, the beds that you guys are sleeping in are replicas of beds of soldiers that bathed once a year, and there were no women ever sleeping in those beds. So if it's women sleeping there, you're probably one of the first. And probably better smelling than some of those men. Alright, we'll keep going, but any questions about the wooden horse? And please, throughout the night, don't get the idea to get on top, because it is quite dangerous, and we don't want to have to scoop you up. And we definitely don't want to see you in the same fate, of course, as the lovely gentleman who was stabbed. So be careful. Be careful you're putting it down, because it is a little bit
I'm not that freaked out anymore. I only get freaked out if I think I see something else.
What?
Yes. To be honest, I've never really done anything like this.
Yeah, this is neither.
I was going to do the thing at the petting zoo like this, but I stopped. What's going on? That looks like a
That's not, this is a different lady.
a different thing?
Huh?
Sorry, I'm confused.
Oh, you're dead. I'm gonna sit down.
Yeah, I guess.
Both of them.
Wait,
Maybe they're listening. Who knows?
maybe they're missing out.
Yeah.
They could be, having a good time sleeping. So wait, are people dressed up in costumes to scare us?
I guess not.
They're just basically talking about stuff.
Yeah. And then the next one is where you go looking for them.
Wait, would they try attacking?
No.
Want to go to the next one too?
Yeah.
When I was in the church, to be honest, I ended up holding my fist and started freaking out because it kind of sort of a church.
Yeah.
What's happening towards us? Oh, it's another group.
Yeah. Crossbow
Not in the wall. We're rustic, right?
Could you stop and we go and we'll get Are you alright?
I'm good. I just wanted to be injured like all the ghosts.
Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
What's that?
Oh, I can't see. I was trying to move it.
Okay.
Alright. So. It's kind of dangerous to step in this, so please don't. But in the 18th century, this house belonged to the Lapinot family.
Wait, which one? That one?
This one right here. This is the foundation. There's no actual house. We left it like this because it was a tragedy for the family. Now, this family, did anybody know that there were slaves in Canada? You guys knew there were slaves in Canada?
Yes, I told everybody that.
So there were slaves in Canada. We did have some here, between 300 and 400. One of them living in this house here. Now, I don't tell this story because her ghost may not be here, but I do tell it because, of course, it's not an easy life. This poor woman was owned by the Lapinot family, helped raise their children for over 12 years. She was captured and sold. She was in slavery, coming all the way from the West Indies, so you guys know, in the Caribbean. She had a child by one of her masters. May have been consensual, may not have been. And then her son died before she did. So, you never know, but there isn't really a chance that her son, she's probably not haunting here because she had a good life. But for slaves living here in the 18th century, of course, life was not ideal. They were property of the people living here. And there were large amounts of assault that was happening, illegitimate. You guys know what I mean when I say illegitimate children, the kids? You guys know what that means? Doesn't matter. There were children that were being born of slaves. And of course, like my sister was mentioning there, the child in the Bastion could easily have been a child, not necessarily of a slave, but of someone as well that didn't want the child to be born. So here you'll see we did not rebuild this house. So she probably isn't haunting this house like her masters did, but her master did give them her freedom. But because we had large amounts of abuse here, there is a chance as well that you will see spirits walking around that have unresolved issues with some of their abusers. So be careful as well of women walking around. Maybe like that crying woman in the chapel. So just be careful. Yeah, don't go exploring in the ruins unless you have light. Because I'm just gonna, thank you. I'll try that when I get down. I'm a little hungry.
Oh, I can't get mine good. Now I'm making one good. Look at this.
Sorry.